As Gail said, my name's Ben Stapleton. I'm the executive director for USGBC California. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that organization is and what we're doing throughout my presentation today. And just a little frame of reference on me. I've grown up here in California. I spent my whole life here. I travel around the state all the time. I go backpacking at least 2 or 3 times a year in the mountains and the coast here. And so for me to be in this place where to hopefully make a positive influence, the place that I grew up means a lot. But I would also say that California is kind of a microcosm of the world in many ways. We've got the breadbasket of America here, right? We've got the largest manufacturing base in the country. People don't really think about that. That's based here in California. We got Silicon Valley. We got Hollywood. We've got the largest populations outside of their home countries of over 60 different ethnicities here in California. And I'm going to talk about this a little later too, but we're the 5th largest economy in the world. And so I know there's people here from all over the world today. I'm going to talk a lot about California, but that doesn't mean that this isn't about you or we don't care about you. I just think we're a great place to test things out and to be a model. And if we can figure some of these things out, how can we help export those out to the rest of the world in a way that can be meaningful? And how can we bring some of those great ideas from around the world here and help make them part of what we do here in the US as well? I'm hoping if I just click a button, it works. Oh my God, look at that. So you're probably wondering what this weird picture is. My daughter has been putting these together ever since she was a baby, really. She put this together about 1.5 years ago. She's 8 now. She just goes out in the yard and kind of makes these little art, installations and projects. And I want to start with this today because this is kind of what it's really all about, right? It's kind of about us as people trying to make sense of this world a little bit, trying to make sense of nature and maybe get a little bit closer to that. I think we're at a time right now in society, in the world, where things probably feel a little bit out of balance, a little bit out of whack, and not as stable as maybe they seemed a little bit ago. And I think it's just important to kind of remember this, right? It can be just as simple as this kind of connection to nature and the world around us. And our vision here at USGBC California is pretty simple. As Gail said, we're transforming California into a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable place for all. That doesn't mean it's easy. It just means it's simple. And I should tell you something else. I'm a recovering commercial real estate broker. I am not an engineer. You probably would have figured that out in about 30 seconds anyway. But I've been a green building nerd for a long, long time, and something about this space has always resonated with me. And I've been a community builder for a long time. And as a real estate broker, I worked with all different kinds of business sectors and industries out there. I'm sure you have as well in your work. And I think you would have to agree, we've got probably the best business community that's out there. We've got bright people working together, willing to share with each other how they just did this awesome project that won them maybe the biggest project of their career, and they're going to turn right around and share how they did it with the person next to them. And you just don't see that anywhere else. And so this community is special, and I'm seeing that here today and just having the opportunity to share a little bit of the space with you. And so I hope we all hold on to that. And at USGBC California, we're really focused on action. The things I just said, we do through the built environment, right? It's about buildings. I do this work because everything comes home in a building somewhere, whether it's energy, water, waste, health. It's all coming home in a building somewhere. And through our buildings, we can make impacts on everything else. And so what we do, we try to, there's action words up there. We're leading, we're educating, we're connecting, we're advocating. And the truth is, we need you to all be part of it. The whole title of this talk today is humanizing our resistance to make buildings better again, make buildings great again even. And the truth of that is, there are no buildings without people. And you are the people that help make that happen. And that's a big deal. And you should really take that to heart. So our work is really driving market transformation through impactful action and education. But again, we can't do it without people. It's all about community. And in the last year, we've had about 20,000 people involved in our work throughout the state. You'll see there's a little mix of that there, and through training, through programs, through events. I really encourage you to just get engaged and involved. You're already doing that by being here today. You're being engaged, and that's really, really important. And as Gail mentioned, last year, we brought together 7 different green building communities across California into one statewide entity. They told me it couldn't be done. It took about 1.5 years, and it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy, and it's in many ways still in progress, because as I said, it's all about people. But this gives us an amazing opportunity to create influence, to have a louder voice, to really prove what's possible here in a place that I mentioned is a microcosm of the world, and show that we can make money, having better buildings, that we can make money pushing towards net zero, that we can do these things in a way that's going to help make our communities better and make our people healthier. And so coming back to California for a moment, I mentioned we're the fifth largest economy in the world. I think last year we were briefly fourth, and then Germany kind of overtook us again. That's okay. It's not a competition, kind of. But we experience a lot of the biggest impacts of climate change here, whether that's extreme heat, erosion, flooding, you kind of name it. We have it here. And some people might say, well, that's kind of depressing, right? We got all these challenges. Sure. And I'm an optimist. I'd like to believe as I get older, I become more of a rational, realistic optimist. But we also have the opportunity to solve a lot of these challenges here. And it's because of people like you who are doing this work to really push the barriers in front of us. And so why are we doing this now? Why do we try to make this new statewide thing and see if we can move things forward? It's an opportunity for us to really impact a lot more people. It's the opportunity for us to accelerate that fight against climate change. It's an opportunity for have a voice for California to help influence policy. And now more than ever, could we have thought of a better time to have done this, to help carry the torch forward on buildings and on the work that we're collectively trying to do, to really help lead the world around these issues. So that's why we did that. And people always ask, what's your relationship with USGBC? And I want to make sure I note that USGBC is our partner. We're doing this in partnership with them, but we are an independent organization. I like to say for California, by California. We have an independent board. We're independent financially. And that was really important so that we could push the barriers, right? Push the limit. And again, what we're trying to do is accelerate that market transformation. So you see this little wheel here, a lot of that is about education. And yes, we need to have systems and certifications and things that we can have people move towards. And we want to inspire people. We want to give awards. We want to create that cultural shift that's going to move these things forward. And all this creates this reaffirming cycle. And that's incredibly important. And the reality is here in California, we've got 1.27 billion square feet of LEED certified buildings and growing in the state. Almost 30,000 certified LEED professionals. There's consistent growth in not just LEED, but all these other certifications. And there's compelling impact for them. And there's something for everyone kind of up there. I always like to say we're certification agnostic here at USGBC California. I feel like people are always surprised when I say that. And certifications play an important role. They provide that structure. They provide that rigor to make sure people are doing the right things. And sometimes people do the right things. They don't need the certification, and that's okay too. So there's probably something up here that speaks to you. I always like to make sure we point out LEED, but WELL's really driving things forward around occupant health. Envision, I don't know if anyone here is Envision certified. I'm Envision certified. I think it's a great way to look at projects and infrastructure that's really widely applicable. So again, there's something for everyone, and we need to make sure that we're being leveraged to make that change happen. And you look here across the state, it's not a surprise. The bigger metropolitan areas have those clusters of buildings. But you can see that we've got over 25,000 buildings here with green building related certification. So it's happening here in California. And guess what? We still are the fifth largest economy in the world, right? And we're still growing, right? We're doing it. We're making it happen. And I think we need to lean into that a little bit. If you want to learn more about buildings here in California, I'm going to throw like 100 QR codes at you today, so I'm not even going to talk about them, but they're there if you want them. We've got a mapping tool that has LEED certified buildings and actually I think like 20 other certifications in California. If you want to get your buildings into that, if you don't see them there, contact me. We can drop them in. We have an easy data import tool. We have video, images, and other things on these buildings here if you want to check that out. I want to talk a bit about why are we doing this? And I'm sure most people here are familiar that we're trying to achieve some greenhouse gas reductions to keep us from hitting these temperature thresholds. We used to say 2 degrees Celsius. Now we say 1.5 degrees Celsius. And look, I'd like to say, I said this earlier, I'm a realistic optimist. Greenhouse gas emissions went up last year. They went up the year before that. They're probably going to go up this year. And I do think we can change that. We're slowing that progression. We're seeing that right now, especially in the building sector. We are making great progress, but we need to move a little bit faster. We need to think a little bit smarter. We need to work together more. And why? If you look at this graph here, you can look at the bottom. If we look at a reduced moderate rate scenario, or at our current rates, in the years 2006 to 2039, we could see a 3 degree Fahrenheit roughly increase in temperature. But then the next couple decades, that could be 6 degrees. Tail end of the century, we can look at almost a 10 degree increase in temperatures here across the state. I'm going to share another graph with you later that shows extreme heat impacts and others, but 10 degrees, that's a lot in a lot of places that already experience, 3 to 4 months where it can easily get over 100 degrees. So, by the way, Phoenix had 100 days over 100 degrees last year, which just blows my mind. I don't know how they do it. But it's not just heat, right? We're seeing increasing, sea levels, reductions in our snowpack. We just continue to see this, rubber band effect of we'll have drier spells and then lots of heavy rain. And climate change is starting to cause that all around the world. And then drought and wildfire. So I'm going to touch on a variety of these today. And again, I'm not here to hopefully scare anyone or sound pessimistic or doom and gloom, because I actually think our future is really bright. And I believe actually it's the people here in this room who are making our buildings better that can help make this future better. And I hope you take that responsibility home with you a little bit today. And I know I don't need to tell you this. You guys already know this. Buildings account for more than 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And, people talk about transportation all the time. They talk about all this other stuff. This is kind of our moment, building people. Like, people actually care a little bit now about buildings because they're starting to realize, hey, we've kind of got a plan for transportation. Like, we're going to move towards an electrified fleet and all those sorts of good things. But we still have a lot to figure out around buildings. We might know what we have to do, but it's complicated, right? It's complicated. And especially when we think about, like, where do we focus, right? There's all this urban energy infrastructure, and we talk about microgrids and renewables and demand response. And, we're looking at the vehicle infrastructure, and we're putting everything else onto the grid now. And how does that work when we're trying to decarbonize our buildings and drive efficiency and, all those other sorts of things? How does that all function together? And the sad part is it's kind of our job to simplify that for people, right? We just got to figure it out so they walk into their building and it works and their energy bills are lower. That's all they really care about. And that's kind of why they hire us, right, at the end of the day. And one thing I make sure we always talk about is, look, we're decarbonizing our grid. We have state policy that says we have to do that by 2045. And we're electrifying our buildings. We're electrifying our transportation. But not all that's going to work unless we drive energy efficiency also, right? We need to reduce that energy use intensity per square foot so that we can get to a place where we can get it all onto the grid, and it's going to make sense long term. And electrification is really important. I have an example from LA here. The reality is we've had a lot of gas infrastructure here in California, actually a lot more than in a lot of other states and places. And because we've had that gas infrastructure, the majority of all of our heating is just based on combustion. And so I always like to put these things here. People sometimes wonder, well, what causes combustion in my home? It's space heating, it's water heating, it's cooking, it's laundry. Those are the things that we're going to need to phase out if we're going to reduce that combustion use in our homes. And we have lots of data now that points to the fact that that causes increases cases of asthma. There's health issues there. We have leakage that causes GHG impacts. But if you look at this curve here, that next decade is really critical if we're going to hit these climate goals. Like, it's going to take the people in this room figuring out how to electrify things if we're going to get there. If transportation's on its pathway and all these other things are happening, this is on us. This is on the building sector for us to figure out over the next decade. You'll notice, and maybe have heard about these things called REACH codes. I think there's something like well over 50 or 60 cities now that have implemented some sort of REACH code that's really pushing for all electric construction ahead of what the state might do. I feel pretty confident in the next code cycle we're going to see all electric for residential. So these things are going to happen eventually, but these REACH codes are really pushing electrification here across the state in many ways. And I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't talk about embodied carbon and the relationship there with operational carbon, because again, we've had a lot of presentations today around HVAC, around heating and comfort. That's incredibly important. But what we make our buildings with, what we build our infrastructure with, is also incredibly important. And here's why. If we look at the lifetime of these buildings, about 90% of that emissions on average is from the materials, right? It's the concrete, it's the steel, it's the glass, it's the insulation, everything that went into building that building. But only 10% of that's going to come from building operations. And that's, it's again, us looking at this time period over 2015 to 2050. So we're going to be developing a lot of buildings over these coming years. The population's growing. We need to do what we can to really reduce emissions from our manufacturing supply chain. So yes, it matters what we're doing in operating our buildings, but also really, really matters what we're doing around the manufacturing side as well. And the states passed a couple of important laws around this in the last few years. So any building now over 100,000 square feet is required to follow one of these compliance pathways. So either they're reusing 45% of that existing structure, or they're looking at EPDs and they have to hit certain global warming potential limits for those EPDs. And EPDs are environmental product declarations for those that don't know. Or they have to use a whole building life cycle cost assessment and look at a 10% reduction from the baseline. So we've established this here in California, and this is great because this is actually causing a big change for how people approach large buildings here. There's a number of cities that are starting to adopt this for lower square footage thresholds as well, right? So we're starting to see that change. State of Washington's adopted some similar rules as well. And one of the things I wanted to pose today, just because I'm in a lot of these conversations, and I don't know how many people here touch materials a lot, but for the longest time, we've talked about EPDs, right? It's all about EPDs. We got to find EPDs for concrete. We got to find EPDs for steel, for glass, for carpet, for everything we're using. I would actually raise the question, are EPDs enough? EPDs, someone's got to go and really do the research to figure out what went into making this specific thing and where are they getting that data from? It takes a lot of funding, time, expertise. Accuracy is an issue. Manufacturing conditions are dynamic. A supply chain could change and that could shift that EPD, and it's hard to go back and redevelop that EPD. And where transparency issues on source data are a little bit of a challenge too. Oftentimes people are making those EPDs, they're getting that data from those companies. Again, if that supply chain shifts or they're not using whole data, we might have an issue. And I also think it's a little bit of an equity issue. It's difficult for small to medium-sized companies to produce EPDs, requires a lot of internal expertise and resources. It may change access on procurement, right? A lot of big companies, we have some big tech companies and others here in the room, they may require EPDs on their projects now, but the reality is a lot of small to medium producers aren't gonna be able to put those together because it costs them money. And I'm really intrigued by AI in this space. AI is starting to really scrape data and I think they're benchmarking something like 75 or 80% accuracy against EPDs right now. As those get more accurate, could that dramatically lower the cost and get us a lot more visibility into our scope 3 and our supply chain? So that's something I'm really intrigued about that I'm watching over this next year. I think these companies are moving very quickly, but we could see something like, a dramatic 50 to 75% reduction in the cost to get the information you would get out of an EPD. And that could change our transparency around materials in a big way. Climate accountability. So, here in California, we have a couple bills that were passed last year that were really going to require companies that have over $1 billion of revenue here to start disclosing their scope 3 emissions. Companies that do over 500 million in revenue here in California have to talk about climate risk. This is a big deal because we're probably not going to see that from the federal government in the next few years. Call me crazy. I don't know why, but and Europe's starting to roll back some of their requirements as well. They originally came out the gate very strong and they got a lot of pushback, so they're rolling some of that back. So that kind of means California is probably going to be one of the few places that actually has this requirement in years to come. And that also means we have the responsibility of proving out that it makes sense, right? And it works. So this is a big deal, and it's going to really push companies here to make changes. But again, we're the 5th largest economy in the world, right? If we can do it, then other people should be able to do that too. Carbon neutrality, I think this is something that's important for us to continue to dig more into. We're doing all these things that are generating greenhouse gas emissions. How are we investing back in healthy soil? How are we investing back in our forests? How are we investing back in creating the biodiversity that can help kind of shift that balance? We've actually are starting to see the state now invest in those projects. We're seeing companies invest in nature-based solutions. Not many people actually know what that really means when they bring that to a project, but people are starting to talk about it and think about it and see what that is. We talk about direct air capture and some of these other pieces, but those things all use energy. I'm really intrigued by how we reinvest back in the planet itself to help us solve some of our climate crisis. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there. With all the doom and gloom though, if you look at the last few years, like news is pretty good around green technology and green buildings in general. The market's shown a lot of growth, is continuing to show growth. I know some of you who've been in this industry for a long time probably look around and you're like, where the hell did all these people come from? Because it used to probably be just, 10, 20 people coming to these things a long time ago. And now we've got probably over 100 people here today, right? And it's going to continue to grow. And so I want everyone to stay positive because we're the ones that are going to have to continue to carry that torch forward. And disruption works fast. I think, sometimes we think change takes forever. And as much as things change, sometimes it feels like they stay the same. But look at COVID, right? None of us could have foreseen that. And look at how much has really changed in those 5 years. We need to continue to lean into that. If we find a better solution that's cheaper and faster, people move very, very quickly. And that's what we're seeing with AI, right? And these other tools. That's why all the forecasts for data centers, it's all happening way faster than people thought it would, because people are adopting things faster than we thought they would. And we can't plan for all of that. We run an accelerator program called the Net Zero Accelerator. We've ran this since 2020. We bring in about 20 companies a year that we think can have an impact here in California. We help connect them with partners like you for pilot projects. We bring in advisors. Encourage you all, if you're interested, to connect with me. We'll actually be doing our matchmaking for advisors this year, I think in June. Our application closes on the 20th of this month, so just in a few days if you know a good startup. But we take companies from all over the world that we think can have an impact here in California, and we really get them integrated into our community, connect them with folks like you, and get them out on a platform to help hopefully scale their technology solutions. So I hope that's something you can get involved in. I'm going to mention there is a QR code there that'll take you to our flight manual for 2024, which is a collection of pilot project proposals. And then there's also a lot of good news. You look at the sector, here in California around clean energy. Look at that energy efficiency. That's the black thing up there in that top pie chart. Almost, I think that's almost 300,000 jobs out of that big total. So energy efficiency is where a lot of that focus is. That's because energy is where the money is, right? That's where the dollars are. And that's a big deal, right? And we continue to see growth in these industries. And even when we look at decarbonization here in California, we look at our buildings, and especially when we start thinking about our existing buildings, estimates are we need over 100,000 full-time workers in the construction industry to really move that decarbonization forward. And we need a lot more manufacturing, right? So this is a big deal. If we're going to electrify our buildings, we need a lot more electricians out there, right? So this is something we need to really be thinking about. And if we're creating policy that's pushing this, how are we going to develop that workforce for the future? That's part of the humanizing part of all this. We can't do it without people. And so we have a training and workforce development pipeline we built over the last few years. We start them young. We start in schools, K through 12. We have people like you who come out as volunteers for us and teach classes around climate change to kids. We give them design-based kits. Then we have a Green Building Academy for folks who are trying to figure out their space after that, maybe have no exposure at all to the green building world. We get them some training, try to get them placed in jobs. We have our Green Building Corps, which is our intern program, and then we do a ton of training for people like you. And the hope is that you actually get involved in a community. It could be this community, it could be another community. Just find a place where you stay connected once you come through training, and that's going to make you sticky in an industry like this. Here's a quick snapshot of just some of our training that we offer, and it's kind of all across the board, everything from our Green Janitors program to we do work for around ESG and other things. I know we're not supposed to say that acronym anymore, but for folks in the corporate sustainability space. This year, we're launching a bunch of new training, a circular economy and waste fundamentals, an occupant health fundamentals. I really kind of figured that for us, our goal is to kind of be that on-ramp for people to get into the green building world. And so we're developing a bunch of this training that we're launching with industry partners and leaders, developing this content for us so we can get it out there. And most of our training is free. We try to get it paid for by foundations, by our utility partners. So I encourage you to check out some of these things if they speak to you. Most of our training is available through our Learning Center online, so this is not a surprise. Most of us are familiar with online learning and on-demand training. We do really believe in live training, so you access most of our classes through here, but most of them are live. And we have a career center with jobs. All of our recordings of content are up there. We do career fairs once a quarter, so if you're looking to hire or find people, we can hopefully be a great resource for you. If you're looking for that next job, it could be a good place for you to go to find that. We post a ton of jobs all the time. This gets the most traffic of any place on our website. And we also have a professionals directory. So this is important. We get questions all the time from people trying to find someone to help them with their project. They want to make sure they have a certain skill set or they've got a certain kind of certification. So we created this directory a long time ago. You can just search in here. I think we have like 30 different certifications you can check. You can put yourself in there so people can find you. So I encourage you to check that out. If you're trying to look for someone on a project, the whole point is you can find someone to help you move forward faster. So that's why we created that directory. And then I'm going to dive into a couple of those issues I was trying to scare you about a little bit up front. So water, I don't know if anyone here is water fascinates me. I've grown up here. It is nuts how we run water in this state. We have over 400 different water agencies. Most of them are based on laws that are at this point well over 100 years old, and the people who run them are elected. So there's like not a lot of willingness for them to take risks. And our water use is going down every year because conservation is working. And the water uses about 20% of our energy here in California. The biggest energy saving event in California's history was our drought we had in 2016, when everyone reduced their water use, and that saved the most energy ever. But the good news is we got kind of saved this year. Most of California is out of drought at this point, but we know it's going to come back. If you look at the last 20 years, these intensive cycles of drought have only gotten worse. And that will probably continue. We're probably not going to buck that trend. And as I mentioned, revenue is decreasing, water use is decreasing, and water companies don't get investments like energy efficiency does, right? But the truth is, water is energy. It takes energy to move water, takes energy to process water. We need to be thinking about water a bit differently. We've been working on a project with a group called the 50 Liter Home Coalition out of Europe, led by a bunch of corporate partners. And we've actually got point of use monitoring on 32 homes in the San Fernando Valley down in LA. We're getting like 2 million data points a month on water use. And we've dropped water use over 40% through our phase 2. And in our phase 3 right now, we're doing things like recirculating showers. We're doing a polyculture lawn, which is not really a lawn. It's like a bunch of different plant seeds that are all mixed together that kind of looks like a lawn. So we're doing some really cool stuff in that program. So there's hope. And then one of the last things I'm going to talk about today is wildfire. I live in Pasadena in the LA area. The fires that hit us on January 7th stopped a little bit less than a mile from my home. I think most of you probably know someone that was impacted by that fire. Turns out a lot of people know people in the LA area, and it was a big deal. For a sense of scale, we've lost about 14,000 single-family homes and about 17,000 structures in what would you really call just an urban environment, right? Just a suburban environment. A lot of people talk about, well, those are wildfires. It was wildfire until it got into these neighborhoods, and then it became building-to-building fire. We've done a lot of work over the years, helping people rebuild. We've done workshops post the Thomas and Woolsey fire back in 2018, 2019, learned a lot about trauma, learned a lot about how long it takes. We got calls 4 years after these workshops from people who are still trying to figure out how to rebuild their home. So when this disaster hit, we worked on a number of things that I want to share with you. So we've got a resource matchmaking thing on our website where if you've got expertise, if you're an architect, an engineer, a contractor, you can post your expertise there. We have people filling out forms who are homeowners or residents who are looking for things. We've had manufacturers donate things to us, which we're getting out to folks in need. And we're doing in-person workshops. We did one this past weekend in the Altadena area. We're doing one in May in the Palisades area that was impacted. We're launching a rebuilding certificate program for contractors in June, and we just refreshed our wildfire defense toolkit a couple of weeks ago. And I'm really proud of our team. We launched a California wildfire rebuilding guide about 2 weeks ago that's incredibly comprehensive. We did it with our partners at Arup. I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a watershed moment for us because it is very accessible but very thorough. Encourage you to check it out. This is version 1.0 for us. Version 2.0 we're going to release probably in June. That'll include incentives, include anything we've learned in the last couple months. I sit on the commission for LA County that's making recommendations on rebuilding. It changes every week. We're kind of where we think we're going and what we're learning about what's happening. One of the things I'm excited about is we're also launching a group purchasing platform. So this is going to go live next week. For those of you that are manufacturers here, you can actually put your products into this group purchasing platform. There's a page you can fill out as a manufacturer or as a seller. But a key thing is, like, should we have 14,000 people buying individual roof shingles for their home? No, that doesn't make sense. And if we want them to do it sustainably, let's make sure it's cheaper, right? So we're trying to pool purchasing. So I'm excited about this platform. It goes live for us next week. And all this is important. I want to kind of close here on people because at the end of the day, it's all about people. And this is a note here of around heat here in California. It's probably not a surprise that the San Joaquin Valley in the center of the state is going to be the most impacted. But heat impacts everyone here across the state in different ways. And we launched a program back in 2023 now to really engage folks in their homes. We do resident and building owner engagement in English and Spanish. We do building assessments, and we deploy clean technology. We installed 80 heat pumps last year in low-income housing here in California. We did EV chargers. And this stuff's really important because I mentioned earlier about combustion. We do surveys of residents, I think you would think most people don't know in low-income housing maybe about the impacts of gas. I kind of assumed people might know about the negative impacts of gas, maybe 40%. Over 70% of the people we surveyed in low-income housing were well aware of the impacts of combustion on their health, but they felt like they had no agency to make any change. They didn't understand how to switch to electric. They didn't have the ability to do it because their landlord wasn't going to help them do it. And most people have a really strong attachment to their cookware, which is one of the things that kind of surprised me. Like people talk, well, I need to cook with gas. Most people really don't care what heats their pot, but they care about their pots, right? That's the important thing. So we're working on fixing those things. We've launched a bunch of digital tools to help with that transition. And the last thing I'm going to mention is that where we're headed next here in California, which has happened in other places, is around building performance standards. So what is that? Building performance standard, that's a grade for your building, like you might see on a restaurant. In New York, you may have heard of Local Law 97 years ago that really put some pricing on this and forced people into compliance. We've seen laws passed now in the DC metro area and Colorado, and we're working on that here in California. The California Energy Commission is going to basically advise on a statewide policy by 2030. We've been working directly with the CEC to help them figure out how do we fill that gap between now and 2030. And so we had cities start coming to us last year and they said, hey, we need help figuring out building performance. And so we started a peer group. We started with like 2 or 3 cities. We have 37 cities and counties now in this peer group where we're trying to collaborate around policy for buildings on building performance. And it's been really, really powerful. And why are we doing that? Well, we're going to be launching a full-service building resource hub in June of this year that will basically have a bunch of options and resources to help people, financing templates, project development guides, connections to contractors, training for contractors. Because all these cities, it turns out the only cities that have actually been successful in working on existing building decarbonization have gotten huge federal grants to do that over the past few years. Those probably aren't going to be coming anytime soon. And so we need to help make that easier and faster for people to access. We can't expect every city to hire 3 to 5 people to address building decarbonization. That's just not going to work. And so we need to create a centralized place where people can go and get resources to help accelerate those projects. And we're trying to do that. So I really appreciate you having me here today. This has been fantastic so far. I'm looking forward to spending more time with folks. I hope you get involved here, get involved somewhere. Please join us as a member if you're interested. None of this happens without people. And the reality is, just as we've been talking about today, buildings are designed by people, building systems are designed by people, and they're designed for people, right? So it's all about people at the end of the day. And I hope you can subscribe to our newsletter. We have a lot of great content. You'll get at least one of them a week. So, I'll be burning up your inbox, don't you worry. And I hope you can join us here next month at Fort Mason here in San Francisco. Our California Green Building Conference is coming up here. I'm super excited. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a green building nerd by background. So my team keeps trying to get me to have like a regular conference. I'm like, no. This needs to feel like a weird green building nerd festival. I want there to be music and art and different kinds of new technologies everywhere. So I hope you can come and check it out. It's going to be here at Fort Mason on May 22nd. We're going to have a whole day of pre stuff on the 21st, including tours and workshops and other things. And then Greenbuild's coming to LA this year. So if you haven't heard, it's coming to LA. We're excited to host it. I'm one of the co-chairs for the event this year. So come check that out if you want to get out of town a little bit. And then we always have our gala at the end of the year. As we expanded across California, we've changed it a bit. So we actually honor the best buildings in all of California now. So we have the California Green Building Awards, and we get some amazing submissions. I hope you check it out. And this year our theme is California's biomes, which again, as a nerd, I'm pretty excited about. So I hope you come down and party with us. And with that, I'm almost done. Don't you worry. I've only got like 30 more slides. I got like one person who laughed. Thank you. You can also check out our impact report if you're curious what we did last year. But my ask to you is just to come together and let's lead the green building movement here in California to prove what's possible to make impacts beyond the borders of our state and our country. And just know that, you may feel like you're just an engineer on a project, you're just someone who's doing a spec on an HVAC technology. No, you're the ones who are deciding the future, and everything comes home in a building somewhere. So thank you.